Welcome back to another FPL video. Today we're talking about the best midfielders in FPL, and because there are so many options, I'm not going to include any of the budget choices. You can see all of those players analysed in the best budget midfielders and forwards video, as well as the best budget defenders and goalkeepers. Those are already out on the channel. You've also got the best goalkeepers overall, defenders, and here we are now on the midfielders, and there's only one left in the series for the forwards, of course. And at the very beginning of this video, I'm going to mention one player, a mega signing for a Premier League club. He might not be the greatest FPL option overall, but I want to discuss why I think he might become a better FPL asset this season. Not enough, I think, to be worth inclusion in our teams, but it is worth mentioning. Then we're going to go through 26 players who I think are the best options, and at the very end I will then finalize it and make a top 5 list, which I have to say was very difficult because of the amount of options at our disposal. But be sure to share this video around with those that love FPL. Comment your thoughts down in the comment section below, and let's get straight into this video. Declan Rice became the most expensive British player ever, surpassing Jack Grealish's record after a £105 million move to Arsenal. I mean, when do Arsenal spend triple digits on a player? This could be the start of things to come. But Declan Rice has scored 4 goals and assisted 3 times last season. He got 12 bonus points and over 100 FPL points overall. Pretty decent numbers. He only comes in at 5.5 million. And you look at the likes of Saka, who was never a good FPL option before, and what he did last season, and you could maybe see something similar happen to Rice. However, I still think he will be the lone defensive midfielder, and maybe in certain big games, should Thomas Partey stay at the club, Arsenal can employ both Rice and Thomas Partey as a double pivot alongside Martin Odegaard. But in certain home matches, you could also see a midfield three of Kai Havertz, Declan Rice and Odegaard to be a bit more offensive. I do worry a bit about that balance, but I think Declan Rice will still add goals and assists to his game, even if he maintains that lone 6 role, because at West Ham he had more defensive duties. Here he should have a bit more freedom at times to do what he wants and bomb forward, which he can do very well with the ball. And he is still capable of playing a sort of box-to-box / number 8 role, where Xhaka played last season as the left central midfielder. He is capable of playing in that position, and that could be an option for Mikel Arteta in certain games. And if that's the case, you could even see Declan Rice get into 6-7 goals and maybe add an assist or 2 on top of what he did last season. He's already got the bonus points potential. You could say that's a bit more limited now because at West Ham he was the best player, so he was a bit more likely to get those bonus points. And at Arsenal, yes, he might be one of the better players at the club, but you've also got many standouts like Odegaard, Saka, even some defenders like Gabriel can get bonus points. So he might not get that total this season, but I would expect him to score more FPL points, get more goal contributions as well, and that could make him a decent option at that price point. The problem is with Arsenal, you might want 2 or 3 Arsenal players anyway, and Declan Rice isn't on the top 3 in terms of FPL assets. Let's not forget that Eze was one of the highest scoring midfielders in FPL last season. He got 159 FPL points overall and 21 bonus points. Those are crazy numbers for a 6.5 million midfielder. He reached double digits in goals, got 5 assists, and his ownership is around 12%. The fixtures are a bit mixed bag to start the season, but game week 1 and 4, they look like pretty good games there for Crystal Palace and Eze, and I believe he is the best Crystal Palace asset, period. Even though you've got Johnston and a few other decent options like Gay, analyse, I think Eze is the very best options the Eagles have to offer. Pascal Gross is such an underrated player in general, and in FPL, you could also say he isn't talked about enough. Now, he's not going to get you a guaranteed 150 points every single season, but if he gets those consistent minutes, stays fit, he has a good chance of doing so. And last season, he got the same amount of points as Eze, 9 goals and 8 assists, 14 bonus points, and he was the most nailed-on Brighton midfielder. Now, since De Zerbi came in, you could argue Mitoma was as nailed, and maybe if not more. I still think Gross was the most nailed overall, and he's also got set piece duties. He should be on penalties now with McAllister leaving to Liverpool, and that could be yet another string to his bow, and he could easily get to 10 goals or more. And if that's the case, with his creativity and the bonus points potential, I think Gross could even go past what he did last season, get to 160, 170 FPL points, and at 6.5 million, you can't ask for much more. The opening 3 game weeks are fantastic, then it gets a bit shaky, but even in those difficult games, Brighton can do well, and Pascal Gross can deliver. Solly March didn't have consistent minutes towards the end of last season, especially after the FA Cup semi-final against Man United where he missed a decisive penalty, but he is a quality player regardless. He's also got the best creativity of any Brighton midfielder, which also includes Pascal Gross. You look at his XGI, and that is really impressive for a 6.5 million midfielder, and he was even cheaper last season, almost 21. He got 6 goals, 10 assists, and 147 FPL points overall, which is more than the likes of Mitoma. And I think he'll start the first 3 games, or at least 2 of the first 3. But he's got pretty decent competition from the likes of Enciso and Buenanote. And Solly March could sometimes come off the bench, which certainly isn't ideal. And he is the lowest owned Brighton midfielder for a reason when compared to Enciso and also the likes of Pascal Gross and Mitoma. But I still like him a lot. He's got a lot of potential. I think he'll score plenty of FPL points. But I'm actually not as convinced that he's going to reach what he did last season with 147 FPL points. And I think if he isn't nailed, that's going to be a huge disadvantage. And I would look elsewhere amongst the Seagulls. Mitoma had a pretty poor end to the season FPL-wise. He only got around 1 goal contribution in the last 7-8 games, and despite some terrific performances against the likes of Arsenal, no goal contributions or FPL points to show for it. But he scored 7 times, got 9 assists, and also had 16 big chances and 138 FPL points overall in his debut season in the Premier League. Really impressive numbers, and his ownership is almost 40%, and he is a really template pick. So if you want to be a bit different, then going for someone like Solly March or Pascal Gross over Mitoma, or at least alongside the Japanese, that could be the way to go. But I think in terms of just having Mitoma, you're not going to maybe gain too much with the Brighton returns, and Pervis Stupinian is another one who is even more of a template pick than Mitoma, but he is a good option nonetheless, and he is probably the most nailed on Brighton midfielder alongside Pascal Gross, and that's why the ownership number is so high, and also his FPL potential. So is he that much of a better option than Gross and March? I don't think so. But Solly March isn't as nailed as Mitoma, and Pascal Gross sometimes plays a deeper role as a holding midfielder, and if Caicedo leaves the club, this could be more common, with Gilmour and Pascal Gross being the midfield pivot, and that wouldn't be ideal from an FPL perspective. So Mitoma will be in an advanced position. He's going to have a lot of touches inside the opposition's box. He's going to make a lot of dribbles, create chances, score some goals, get a lot of big chances himself. So Mitoma is the most popular option for a reason. I believe he is the best, but there isn't a mega gap, I think, between him and the other Brighton midfielders. Bryan Mbeumo is another template pick despite being reclassified from a forward to a midfielder. I think he would have been even more popular as a forward because at 6.5 million, he would have been our second or third choice alongside an Erling Haaland or Harry Kane. And I think that price remains decent. And the big appeal about Mbeumo is the fact that he could potentially be out of position. He's going to be playing up front potentially in the absence of Ivan Toney, but he's classified as a midfielder. So an extra point for keeping a clean sheet and also for scoring a goal. And I think he could score even more FPL points this time round. To get 150 as a forward is very impressive, and he could easily surpass that now as a midfielder. He got 9 goals and 9 assists, and he also got 18 big chances, and his record in Ivan Toney's absence was terrific. He scored in every single one of those games, and he had pretty much the same amount of goals compared to games and a couple of assists on top of that, and the fixtures are fantastic for the first 9 game weeks of the season for Brentford. So I think Mbeumo justifies that ownership, and he could offer tremendous value for money. We're always kind of on the lookout for these traps, and Mbeumo could be one of them, but I don't think that'll be the case. And as long as Ivan Toney is suspended, which is until January, of course, I think Mbeumo could score a lot of goals and be one of the highest scoring midfielders for his price. Szoboszlai comes in at 7 million and his ownership is around 8%. It probably has increased exponentially since I've recorded this video, but he got 6 goals and 8 assists for Leipzig last season, and he was also on penalty duties, which might not be the case this season, but when you're looking at the 2 signings there for Liverpool in the midfield, both of them are capable penalty takers, but you would expect Salah to maintain those duties. And Szoboszlai also had 14 big chances created. So I think these two, Szoboszlai and McAllister, add creativity, a bit of control to the midfield, and also more energy, which I think Liverpool have lacked since selling the likes of Wijnaldum, and especially in the last year or so, where Liverpool have been severely lacking in that midfield area. Szoboszlai also got 2 red cards though, and that is a mega cause for concern. I'm not saying he's going to be suspended for sure in the upcoming season, but it is possible. and he does pick up a few yellow cards as well. So bear that in mind. His disciplinary record last season wasn't impressive at all, but he's got the goals potential, but more so I'm looking at the assists and the big chances created. I wouldn't be surprised if he struggled to get 5 or 6 goals this season. I'm not saying he won't reach that figure, but without penalties, that will also take away one major asset for his goal scoring abilities. The fixtures are quite mixed bag for the first 5 game weeks, but he remains a good option nonetheless. However, as discussed in the best budget players video, I do prefer McAllister, who comes in at 1 million cheaper. Jarrod Bowen has been one of the most informed players during pre-season, but it is worth mentioning West Ham have played Boreham Wood and Perth Glory, but they scored 4 goals in the first game and 6 in the second, and Jarrod Bowen has scored 3 of his own and assisted twice. So very impressive numbers nonetheless, despite the opposition and anything else you might point towards. But Bowen has some very impressive numbers in terms of the ownership. I think he could be a very appealing differential at that price point. And if you look at the goals and assists he got in the campaign before last season, he got 29 goal contributions overall. And last season, despite being quite underwhelming, he still got 145 FPL points. If he'd done that this season at 7 million, you'd still be reasonably happy. But I think he will improve upon those numbers this time round. He got 6 goals and 9 assists. But like I said in the previous campaign before that, he was absolutely terrific, and he got double digits in both goals and assists. And the fixtures aren't great, but I don't really mind starting the season with him away to Bournemouth. Chelsea at home isn't the worst fixture in the world, and then you look at Luton Town away in game week 4, that looks decent. But I think that Man City fixture is probably enough to put you off from Jarrod Bowen or any other West Ham midfielder, but I have no doubts about it. I think Jarrod Bowen is the best midfielder for West Ham, even over the likes of Lucas Paqueta. Mason Mount has already featured for Manchester United in a 2-0 victory over Leeds United, and he was pretty impressive in his brief cameo. He comes in at around 9% ownership. He only got 3 goals and 4 assists last season. Not that many starts, but if you look at the numbers once again from the 2021-22 campaign, he got 22 goal contributions, and last season was obviously very disappointing. Only 82 FPL points, but I'm certain he's going to get over 100 this time round, and he's also going to boost the goals and assists. But I'm mainly looking at the assists. I think that's going to maybe potentially reach the double-digit mark. I know you've got Bruno Fernandes, who is the creative hub for Man United. He created the most chances of any midfielder, but I think Mason Mount adds a bit more creativity and also more legs in the midfield, and he could be a decent signing as well, despite a bit of a hefty price tag, which you could also say about Kai Havertz. Chelsea have done some very good business selling both of those for around 120 million combined. Now you look at the opening fixtures once again, a bit mixed bag, but game weeks 1 and 3 look fantastic for Man United. You would be expecting maybe a 2-0 victory in each of those, something like that. And even in fixtures such as Tottenham away and Brighton at home, Man United can win those games as well. Of course they can, and they can also score plenty of goals as well. And Mason Mount, I think, will be a decent signing for them. And in terms of FPL, he's going to be much better than he was last season. Richarlison was one of the worst signings in the Premier League last season, but we have to put a bit of context to it. He didn't even play 1,000 minutes, and he didn't get that many starts overall. Of course, despite all of that, you'd still expect more than 1 goal, but I think this time round, maybe I'm saying this a bit too often and being a bit too optimistic, but with a lot of these players, they certainly underperformed last season, and you are expecting them to bounce back and improve dramatically on their numbers, and Richarlison is definitely one of those. His ownership is around 2%. He only scored once, got 5 assists, and in terms of his overall Premier League career, he scored 49 times, 48 for Everton and 1 for Spurs, and he also only got 54 FPL points last season, but he was reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, so that is another bonus, just like with Mbeumo, extra points for the clean sheet and for scoring a goal. And Spurs have some decent fixtures from game week 3 onwards, and Richarlison might not start every single game. There could be rotation with Kulusevski more than anybody else, and also you're keeping a firm eye on the Harry Kane situation. If he leaves, Richarlison will be the main number 9 for Spurs, so he could potentially be playing out of position, and he could easily get into 10 plus goals and also get a lot of FPL points in the process. Kulusevski is another one who had a bit of a disappointing season, maybe not to the same extent as Richarlison, but only 2 goals, 7 assists He also had a lot of injury problems, and he was just shy of 100 FPL points. He had 43 shots overall, which I was quite surprised by, but only 2 goals from those 43 shots. That's an awful conversion rate and also a ratio in general. But with Kulusevski, he is a creative player. He's a very good dribbler, and he is one of Spurs' best players on his day. But he just needs to stay fit and get a consistent run in the team. The main concern is sharing minutes with the likes of Richarlison, but it also depends on the Harry Kane situation and Heung-min Son's form. But as we'll get onto very soon, I am expecting Heung-min Son to have a fantastic season this time round, and Kulusevski should certainly improve on these numbers, and I'm expecting double digits in terms of assists and a couple more goals than 2. Raheem Sterling, yet another underperforming player, and he comes in at 7 million, so his price was dramatically decreased, and it was the joint highest decrease we've had alongside Heung-min Son, and Sterling only scored 6 times, got 4 assists, but you look at some of the numbers from previous campaigns, he consistently got over 180 FPL points, and in the 2018-19 campaign for Manchester City, he got 234. So we all know his quality in front of goal. If he gets those big chances on a consistent basis, he is the one getting into those positions and scoring a bucket load of goals. So he can certainly do that for Chelsea. I don't think he'll get to those standards. I've said this before, but he could easily still get to 200 FPL points, or at least 170, 180. And despite getting over 100 FPL points yet again in his career, that's still very underwhelming for a player of Sterling's quality. You might say his best days are past him, and he's also performing in a worse team in Chelsea. But I am expecting a dramatic improvement for sure with Raheem Sterling, and he would be one of the more appealing midfielder options for the Blues. Leandro Trossard has been fantastic since signing for Arsenal, and even before that, he was performing very well for Brighton before his fallout with De Zerbi. He comes in at 7 million, which looks like a bargain. His ownership is extremely low. He got 8 goals, 13 assists, 8 bonus points, and over 150 FPL points. But I'm not so convinced about his minutes. I think he will get some starts, but nowhere near as often as he would like. For an Arsenal midfielder, you've got the likes of Martinelli, Saka and Odegaard in that position, Gabriel Jesus up front, and all the defenders, as well as Ramsdale to choose from. So unfortunately, Trossard doesn't come in as one of the better Arsenal options for me, unless he got a consistent run of starts and we knew he was going to start pretty much every single game, because for me, he is one of the best in terms of creativity for Arsenal, which is a bit surprising, you could argue, because at Brighton, he was more of a goal scorer, but at Arsenal, only 1 goal and I think 9 assists for the Gunners. But Leandro Trossard is a quality player. He's also versatile. He can play on the left-hand side and also as a striker / false 9. And if he can get those minutes, then I would recommend him. But until then, I'm just not of that opinion. I think he won't get anywhere near as many minutes as he probably deserves. And Arsenal have better midfielder options available. Kai Havertz has been extremely poor since signing for Chelsea, and the only saving grace is the fact that he scored in multiple cup finals, which helped them win trophies. But last season, mainly playing as a striker, only 7 goals and 1 assist. I mean, those are really poor numbers, and the only promising sign is the fact that he had 19 big chances, but it also points towards his bad finishing. And at Arsenal, he definitely needs to fine-tune that and rediscover his best form. He scored over 100 FPL points last season. His ownership is around 6%. He's got a lot of potential if he plays week in, week out. Even as a left central midfielder, he could do extremely well and get to 10 or 15 goal contributions. The problem is, at 500,000 more or even 1 million more, you've got some fantastic alternatives in the Arsenal midfield. So I probably wouldn't go for Havertz, but I am expecting a major improvement and for him to get to his best level and start progressing in his career once again and show the promising signs that he did at Bayer Leverkusen. Luis Diaz has never been a great FPL option, and unfortunately last season he suffered from many injury problems, but at 7.5 million he's certainly got potential to offer some very good value for money. But I just don't think it's worth going for Luis Diaz over Salah to cover Liverpool offensively. And you've also got some decent alternatives at the same price, such as Cody Gakpo up front, even Darwin Núñez, and there should be a bit of a rotation there for Liverpool, especially on the left-hand side. You would expect Salah to be nailed, and then you've got the likes of Darwin Núñez, Jota, Diaz, and Gakpo all competing for 2 spots pretty much, and sometimes it could be a 4-man attack, but in other occasions, especially in the tougher games, it might just be a solid free. And I know Liverpool have sometimes played 4 attackers against the likes of Man City, but that was a few seasons ago when Liverpool were chasing quadruples and also the Premier League title. They have to get back to that level and start competing this season in the Premier League before they start being a bit bolder in their team selections. Diaz remains a decent choice. He's got potential. I think he's a fantastic dribbler and player, but I'm not convinced about him as an FPL asset, and he would be probably in the lower echelons in terms of the best midfielders discussed today. I would also say the same thing about Jack Grealish, despite the fact that he's got some decent creativity numbers. He had 50 key passes, 10 assists, 5 goals. His ownership is under 10%. Decent amount of FPL points as well, coming in at 7.5 million. And he was also one of the more nailed-on Man City players, especially towards the end of the last campaign. But you're looking at the other alternatives there for Man City. Erling Haaland, of course, is going to be the standout to cover their attack. But you've also got Kevin De Bruyne once he returns from injury, and Phil Foden potentially. And there's also going to be a mega shout-out to Alvarez, who I believe could get more minutes than any of us expect to start in game week 1. So Jack Grealish, he's an okay option, I think. But just like with Diaz, I don't think he is the best FPL-wise, and there are better alternatives elsewhere. Now, in terms of Phil Foden, the big concern is always the minutes. He can have a really good run of form and he's scoring in every single game, and then he suddenly dropped for weeks, maybe even months on end, and that could be pretty much the end of him as an FPL asset for the season. But I think Phil Foden could get more game time with Kevin De Bruyne potentially missing out in game week 1, and that of course could be fantastic. At 7.5 million with Phil Foden's high ceiling, he could be one of the very best FPL options, period. However, despite Kevin De Bruyne potentially missing out the opening portion of the season, I'm still not convinced about Foden starting games, and that tells you a lot about how much I don't trust Pep Guardiola to give Foden those minutes for me to go for him. And I've been burned by Foden a lot of times in the past, and of course, what's happened in the past doesn't always, mean it's going to keep on happening in the future. But with Phil Foden, I'm actually not really looking at him as the Kevin De Bruyne replacement, but more so Julian Alvarez. And that was the case last season when De Bruyne missed out. It was Alvarez coming in just behind Erling Haaland, and Phil Foden is really one for the wing. So he's competing with Mahrez on the right-hand side, Bernardo Silva at times, and also the likes of Jack Grealish on the left-hand side. In terms of as a striker or as a second striker, as an attacking midfielder, whatever you want to call it, Phil Foden isn't really playing in those positions, and that's why I'm not convinced. He's also capable of playing as part of a midfield free, so he could also play the Gundogan role, for example, but I'm just not convinced, and I think we need to see some consistent starts in pre-season before I start building some confidence in Phil Foden getting enough game time from the get-go. One 7-point family midfielder that I expect plenty of starts from is James Maddison, but another caveat to him is the fact that he gets injured quite often, and that could also break his form because he's a very streaky player. He can go 5 to 10 games basically in a row getting a goal or assist, but then he can go 5-10 games after that basically blanking because he's either injured or just coming back from an injury. But his creativity numbers are fantastic. 69 chances created. He got 10 goals and 9 assists and a decent number of FPL points. He also missed some crucial penalties for Leicester last season, but he is capable of taking penalties and he could be second or third in command for Tottenham Hotspur. Harry Kane is always going to have those penalties, of course, should he stay at the club. And Maddison's ownership is around 18%. And he was actually in my first preliminary draft using FPL.team. And I'm still open to including Maddison or another Spurs midfielder, not Kulusevski or Richarlison. But I think Maddison is even better than those two and probably in the top 3 or 4 Spurs assets overall. Diogo Jota has a high ceiling. Even last season in certain games like Leeds United, he had some mega returns and he got 7 goals and 4 assists, pretty underwhelming for his standards because in the previous campaign, he got 22 goals and assists combined. He only got 80 FPL points in the last season and his ownership is of course very low at around 2%, but the fixtures are a bit mixed bag. Diogo Jota isn't nailed. As I discussed earlier with Diaz, you've got a lot of competition for the left wing / striker spots. Therefore with Jota, if you go for him and he's starting in a certain game week, such as game week 2 against Bournemouth at home, then he could give you 10 to 16 points easily. But the problem is there's also going to be a lot of 1-pointers along the way coming off the bench, and he's also going to have maybe a fair share of injury problems as well. But I'm mainly concerned about rotation with the other forwards, especially Liverpool also being included in the Europa League this season. That means even more games. I know they were in the Champions League last season, but bear in mind if they finish second in their group, they will have an extra 2 games in the knockout stages compared to those playing in the Champions League, and I believe the Europa League already has more teams in the knockouts anyway. But Diogo Jota has potential, he's got a high ceiling, but I wouldn't go for him. And if you want to cover Liverpool offensively, you've got McAllister at 6 million, and also the likes of Salah, who is as good as anybody. I've mentioned them a few times in my videos. Be sure to check out the link in the description below for drafthound, because they give you so many different stats, and they can also help you optimize your FPL team with the assistant manager tool if you upgrade to the pro tier, and you can do so using my link as well, so we can both help each other out. But I would highly recommend the likes of Martinelli, because Arsenal, according to drafthound, are in the top 3 in terms of chances of scoring 2+ goals in every single one of the opening 5 game weeks, because Arsenal have as good of fixtures as anybody in the league alongside Man City, and Martinelli's ownership is still around 14%. He scored 15 times last season, the joint highest with Odegaard, and he got 9 assists. His XGI was over 20, and he got over 200 FPL points. So if Martinelli can stay fit, because he has had a lot of injury problems in the past, he's going to start the vast majority of games despite having some very good competition in the likes of Trossard, and he could easily get the most goals of any Arsenal player, including their strikers as well. And Martinelli also is capable of playing down the middle, and whilst that hasn't happened too much under Arteta, it is something that could happen in the foreseeable future. And coming in at 8 million, half a million cheaper than the likes of Odegaard and Saka, I think Martinelli could offer even better value than those two star players for Arsenal. Bruno Fernandes also experienced a significant decrease in price, just like Sterling and a few others that I've mentioned before, and he comes in at 8.5 million, but his ownership is actually higher than the likes of Rashford. So over 20% ownership, he got 8 goals, 9 assists, and he created 32 big chances, as well as the most chances of any player in the league, and he got 176 FPL points. If you can do that once again, you'd be quite happy with that, but you're still expecting more from Bruno Fernandes, and if he's also on penalties from game week 1 to the very end, then he could easily get to 200 plus FPL points, and you're looking at game weeks 1 and 3, and you're really hoping for hauls from the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford. For me, those two are the best Man United options, period. Then you've also got the likes of Luke Shaw to make up their top 3, but Bruno Fernandes is always going to be up there as one of the best midfielders in the game, and for him to be only 8.5 million does spell a potential bargain on our hands. Martin Odegaard was fantastic for Arsenal last season, but you are kind of expecting a bit of a drop-off in terms of the goal-scoring numbers and maybe more assists this time round. He actually got 30 bonus points, which was the most of any Arsenal player, even more than the likes of Saka. He got the most FPL points as well, and that was mainly because of the bonus points, and of course the goals and assists do help a lot, but Odegaard is also capable of getting a lot of bonus points even if he doesn't get that many goal contributions. I remember against Aston Villa away, he only got 1 assist and yet still managed to get all 3 bonus points, and that's because he is a quality player, he creates chances, he dictates the play, and he's got so much energy and is a bit of an all-action midfielder. However, having said all of that, I still think the likes of Saka and Martinelli will get more goal contributions this season, and I am expecting a bit of a drop-off in terms of goals, at least, for Martin Odegaard. Now, he is only 24, he's the captain of Arsenal. I'm not saying he can't improve on his numbers, he certainly can, but the way I'm looking at it, I'm expecting more assists and a bit more of a creative role for Odegaard and fewer goals this time round. But I could be completely wrong about that. He can still get double digits in goals and assists quite easily, but I'm not expecting him to reach 15 goals. And also in terms of FPL points, I'm looking at Martinelli and Saka, and I think they'll outscore Odegaard if they stay fit. Bukayo Saka scored in Arsenal's 1-1 draw against Nuremberg, and he also had a very good end, at least in terms of game week 38 against Wolves, carry that form over into the international break for England. And of course, he is playing against weak opposition and all of that, I do understand that, but Bukayo Saka is also capable of scoring against any top 6 club. His record against those so-called big clubs is very impressive, and his ownership is over 50%, which is absolutely mental. And honestly, that's one of the main reasons why I would consider going for Odegaard over Saka, purely because of ownership and going a bit against the template. But honestly, I said this even just now, I think Saka will score more points than Odegaard and get more goal contributions. So are you really just going to go for a player because of ownership? Maybe that isn't the way to go, of course, but I would still recommend having Saka, but also adding a second Arsenal midfielder on top of that. And Martinelli being only 14% ownership, I want to say is criminal, but he is definitely overlooked, and I think Martinelli could be the highest scoring Arsenal midfielder, period. The problem is he's the most injury prone between him, Saka and Odegaard. And you look at some of the numbers, 14 goals and 12 assists. Salah's the only other player to get double digits in goals and assists. So Saka had a tremendous season, 67 shots inside the box, and the same number of FPL points as Martinelli. And a lot of the algorithms favour Saka as one of the highest scoring players in the opening 5 game weeks, and only the likes of Erling Haaland really trump him. So Saka is going to be a template pick for a reason. He's got the fixtures, he's also got the stats to back it up, a bit of form as well from pre-season, and I think Saka could just start off really well. We had a very poor end to the season when you look at maybe from March or April to the very end, but I think he will bounce back from that. He's had some very difficult moments in his career already, and he's very mentally strong. He does recover very well from a penalty miss in the Euros final to whatever else, maybe the penalty miss against West Ham, which was maybe a bit symbolic in the title race. But Saka will bounce back. He's got the penalty duties as well, which is a mega plus for him, as well as being the most nailed-on Arsenal player alongside Martin Odegaard. Rashford's another one who you could argue is severely underpriced, just like Bukayo Saka, Martinelli and Odegaard. He scored 205 FPL points last season. He also had 35 big chances, and I think that's a mega stat in his favour. Only the likes of Harry Kane and Erling Haaland would be better in that stat. You've also got 17 goals and 7 assists. A very poor end to the season as well, dating back from February, where his goals dried up, the assists as well. Man United also had some really bad form, but I think with a few other signings and also more creativity, you could argue, I think Marcus Rashford could do extremely well. The problem is, if Man United sign a striker, then the goals focus might shift a little bit from Rashford to that striker that comes in. I think Man United, more than anything else, need a striker. Yes, they also need a midfielder, and they've signed Mason Mount, and Onana is about to join the club as well. They needed a goalkeeper, but the striker was the main priority. A lot of times Man United will win a game 1-0 or struggle to score a goal because they didn't have that striker and were over-reliant on the likes of Marcus Rashford. So he might not have as many big chances this season if they do sign that goal scorer on top of it. But Rashford should still be a decent FPL option and justify that 9 million price tag. He is a template pick at over 40% ownership as well. The fixtures are a bit mixed bag, but he remains a worthwhile inclusion in your Game Week 1 team. Heung-min Son had a very poor season for his lofty standards, just coming back from winning a Golden Boot in the following campaign. He had a lot of benchings. He struggled for form until probably April/May, where he had a decent end to the campaign. He still managed to get 10 goals and 6 assists, which certainly isn't bad, but for a player of Son's quality, you would still expect much more. And actually, one really impressive stat is the fact that he made 62 key passes. So his creativity was a bit underrated last season, and I think he played a bit more of a creative role, and that also was to the detriment of his goal-scoring ability. And he also said in an interview recently that he had some problems, I think, with hernia. So Heung-min Son should be back. I think he had surgery, solved everything now. He should be fully fit, raring to go, and also well capable of getting 15 to 20 goals. And as a 9 million midfielder, that is still going to be tremendous value for money. And for me, probably the best stat of them all is the ownership. He's being overlooked by a lot of people because he had a poor season, and to be honest, that's completely understandable. The first 2 game weeks are pretty tough as well, but I still think Heung-min Son is worth considering, and he could be one of the very best options of any player, not just in the midfield. Kevin De Bruyne is arguably the best player in the league, and he's always up there for assists, bonus points and FPL points for a reason. And Man City have the best fixtures for the opening 7-8 game weeks of this season, and De Bruyne comes in at just 10.5 million. Now, he did suffer an injury in the Champions League final, and there are doubts about him being available for Game Week 1, but things look a bit more positive now than they did back when we had the Champions League final in early June, and his ownership is only 5%, so he could be a mega differential for your teams. But obviously, if we get confirmation that he has returned from injury, that ownership will surely increase, and I wouldn't be surprised if it reached double digits as well. But De Bruyne is certainly capable of being one of the highest scoring players yet again. The injury is always going to be a concern. He sometimes gets his minutes managed to prevent injuries, and it's very good management by Pep Guardiola, but I still think Kevin De Bruyne is worth considering at that price point as a differential in certain game weeks. It almost sounds foolish to say this, but Salah, in a way, had a bit of a disappointing season, yet look at these numbers. I mean, they're absolutely terrific. 19 goals, 13 assists, 125 shots, and 239 FPL points. I mean, what more can you ask for? He's still right up there as one of the very best FPL assets season in, season out. Yes, Game Week 1 doesn't look great, even Game Week 3 as well, but Salah is capable of scoring against absolutely anybody, and if Liverpool can improve and have more creativity from the midfield and more chances created for him, then Salah could easily outscore the likes of Erling Haaland, which sounds crazy to say this because Haaland plays in the best team in the world, but Salah for me is as good of an FPL asset as anybody, and the main appeal for him is the fact that he's a midfielder and he's always out of position. He's scoring one of the most goals every single season. He's always up there in the top 3 at least. He's won golden boots in the past, and he also gets plenty of assists, which is almost overlooked by him. So Mohamed Salah is still worth inclusion, worth considering. The problem is, with the way that FPL is structured in terms of prices, it's difficult to include Erling Haaland and Salah in your team, and if you do have both of them, then you're going to have to make sacrifices elsewhere. And it's even more difficult when you try to add a third premium, such as Trent Alexander-Arnold or Harry Kane, to name 2 examples there. But Mohamed Salah is still one of the very best options. For me, he is still number 1 for midfielders. And speaking of the rankings, if I had to give kind of a quick ranking, and look, I have to say I've changed this list multiple times, before recording this video. Salah for me is still number 1, despite not having the best fixtures to start the season. In second place, I'd probably put Bukayo Saka, and I'm also including price and taking that into account. And despite Salah being 12.5 million, I still think he is number 1. In third position, it's very close, I think, between the likes of Martinelli and Odegaard, but I'd probably give the edge to Martinelli if he can stay fit. In fourth, I'd go for Heung-min Son. I think at 9 million, he's going to have a much better season and almost make a mockery of his price tag. And in fifth position, it's between those 2 Man United midfielders, and I'd probably give the edge to Bruno Fernandes over Rashford. And you've got the likes of Kevin De Bruyne as well. He's going to be right up there in terms of FPL points scored of any player, and you could argue he is second or third best overall. But my top 5 ranking for the midfielders is that, and Salah remains number 1, and I'm still waiting for someone to kind of knock him off his perch. You could argue Erling Haaland has done that in terms of players overall, but I would not be surprised if Salah finished with more FPL points than anybody in the upcoming season. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Who are the best midfielders, and which midfielder options are you considering? Maybe some differential ones that could break the template. I also mentioned them in the best differentials video, and there's also the best budget midfielders and forwards video, where I discuss plenty of 6 million midfielders and below, as well as the forwards, of course, who you can't forget about as well. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to over 200 likes. Let's keep on pushing towards 20,000 subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, channel memberships, Discord server, the FPL League, drafthound. Be sure to check all of that out. I'd highly recommend it, and I wish you all the best of luck for the upcoming season. Enjoy the summer break, and I'll see you next time.